What is a private investigator? I know that question should be easy and simple to answer, but is it really? I get asked this question a lot, especially from people when I first meet them and they learn that I am a professional private investigator. It still amazes me how much intrigue and how much mystery there is about the professional private investigations profession. And that is the first part of many parts to the answer to today's question, what is a private investigator? In reference to being a private investigator, I always refer to myself as a professional investigator. Back in the day, way back before color TV and the internet, the private investigator was viewed as this somewhat mysterious individual with a dimly lit, smoke-filled office at the end of a dimly lit and sometimes scary hallway in some building way off the beaten path. Back then, PIs, or private eyes, were mostly working cases like cheating spouses, where the beautiful damsel hired the PI to follow her husband around and catch him in some precarious activities with some other beautiful damsel. Way back in the day, the PI was seen as that guy lurking in the shadows, listening in on conversations, picking locks to gain entry into their target's house or office, and doing other questionable things to further their career. Now, back in the day, information was not quite as easily accessible as it is today. I remember just 15 years ago when I got started as a professional private investigator, looking in phone books at payphones around town to find information regarding my subject. That is right, I couldn't just get on Google and search and find addresses for people. Many times I had to drive to some rural little town back in the woods somewhere and stop at a few phone booths to check out the phone book and see what addresses, phone numbers, and business information I could derive from it. I had to stop at multiple phone booths too, because many times they would have different phone books from different phone companies or different years of publication, so the information may be different from one to another. Now back to those PIs from way back in the day. You remember, before color TV, before cell phones, and before the information age we live in today. Those private investigators had to rely a lot on the information they could gather from interviews with individuals such as neighbors, store owners, restaurant and cafe employees, people on the streets, and yes, even the police. They had to do whatever it took to get the drop on their subject, get the intel, the information they required to solve the case. Now, what is the difference between that PI and today's professional private investigator? Now, first, let me say, while there were back then some rather unsavory individuals working as private eyes, there were also many good guys working in the profession. There were PIs who had moral values and moral compasses and worked an honest day's work for an honest day's wage. Yes, even today there are unscrupulous PIs out there. There are bad guys in the industry who take advantage of their clients, are opportunists at best, and who are working without those moral values that separate a true professional from the rest. But the truth is, most are professionals. Most have that moral compass they follow, and most professional private investigators work within the laws, the regulations, and the ethics required to be in the profession. What is a private investigator in 2022 anyway? Well, the generic description of what a PI is hasn't changed a whole lot, or has it? According to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, private detectives and investigators search for information about legal, financial, and personal matters. And private detectives and investigators work in many places depending on their assignment or case. Some spend more time in offices researching cases on the computer, while others spend more time in the field conducting interviews and performing surveillance. Private detectives and investigators often work irregular hours. And there is a lot to be said about that last statement. PIs often work irregular hours, especially if the PI is, let's say, a surveillance investigator. Surveillance investigators oftentimes start their days in the wee hours of the morning, like 4 or 5 a.m., so they can get set up long before most of us are even out of bed. Or they could be working late evenings and nights in the cover of the dark to try to, yes, catch that unfaithful spouse, working a fraud investigation, covering an asset protection case, or many other types of investigation which require the professional PI to work those irregular hours. Today's private investigator, much like PIs from the past, also work investigations wherein they track down people, search for assets, search for valuables, gather evidence, conduct scene investigations for varying kinds of investigations such as accidents and criminal defense situations, and the list goes on and on. You see, the profession hasn't changed all that much, but the means to the end for the professional PI has some newer nuances to be sure. Back in the day, the true sleuth, the good PI, had to know where to get the information, who to talk to, and what questions to ask. And you know what? Today is not much different. But today, a good PI has to know about all the places to go. Literally hundreds of websites where he or she can get that intel on their subject. Today, a PI has to have access to those top secret PI databases, which they didn't have back in the day. That provides so much great detail in comprehensive reports, locate reports, vehicle sightings, employment and residential history, and more. And today, in most states, a PI must obtain a professional private investigator's license to work or even advertise themselves as a private investigator or a private detective. And that licensing, in many ways, was brought about by those unscrupulous opportunists back in the day. And yes, there are still those guys, those unscrupulous opportunists that take advantage of people in this day and age. Thus, the need for continued licensing for PIs. But wait, it's not just like apply for a license, pay a fee, and you're in. For PI licensing, there is always some form of diligent testing required, and extensive backgrounds are conducted to include state and federal Bureau of Investigations backgrounds. That is probably one of the biggest differences between working in the private investigations profession today versus working it back in the day. And another huge question I hear is, how do I get the experience I need to get my PI license? And I made this video right here that can provide answers to that question. I want to really quick send a huge thank you to the PI Guy Premium supporters. Thanks so much to Eric Hutchinson, Talk to London A. Till, Nick's STL77, Rex Fowler, and Eric Lewis for all of your support. I really do appreciate it.